Hello everybody and welcome back to Rishi Outpost. Today I'll be talking about Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 1. This will be an all-spoiler review, so if you haven't finished the show yet and you don't want to have it spoiled for you, I would suggest you click away now and come back after you've watched it. Now, to dive right into it, I thought the first season of The Bad Batch was pretty good, but I think it left more to be desired. Before I expand on that, I do have to point out how well made this show is on a technical level. First of all, the animation and the visual style of this show are just absolutely beautiful. Every single episode really wowed me by how good it looked. Particularly every time water showed up, it reminded me how far Star Wars animation has come since the first season of the Clone Wars. At that time, the creators were pretty much afraid to even have water on the show because of how difficult it was to animate. The music for the show is also really good too, especially toward the end of the season, how the clone theme is weaved in when the Bad Batch is witnessing the destruction of Kamino. I also have to tip my proverbial cap to D. Bradley Baker, who almost solos this show's voice performances and as always does a really great job. I also have to say that I enjoyed the storyline of the show from week to week. I thought seeing the rise of the Empire from the point of view of these runaway clones was really cool, and I thought the missions they went on had a lot of potential to drive the show in an interesting direction. Filler is a term that I think has lost pretty much all meaning at this point, as it's used to describe basically any piece of media that doesn't involve the death of a main character, which is just not the way that a show like The Bad Batch was ever going to be. I think it's really interesting how much of a higher standard we seem to have for animated Star Wars compared to live action. People absolutely love Season 1 of The Mandalorian, and I would easily argue that just as much happened story-wise in this season of The Bad Batch, but I think because seeing Star Wars in live action is such a treat that we forgive something like The Mandalorian and are disappointed by something like The Bad Batch. This isn't something I'm at all immune to myself, it's just something that I've noticed and I think it's really interesting. With that being said, I do want to dive into the specific aspects of The Bad Batch that I was disappointed by. The character development in this season is really underbaked in my opinion. Omega, Crosshair, and Hunter are pretty well done, but Wrecker and Tech are little more than caricatures of their names. And while Echo is technically in every episode of this show, his presence is barely ever felt throughout the entirety of the season. I found Echo particularly disappointing because he was brought back from the dead in the Clone Wars Season 7, and that's not really something a good story should do unless there was a solid plan where the character has an important role going forward, which this season clearly proved was not the case. I also just really liked the character in the Clone Wars, so I found him having such a small role to be personally disappointing. A lot of people wrote off the various missions that the Bad Batch went on as filler, but I actually thought they provided a lot of good opportunities for these characters to develop, but the show repeatedly opted to have longer action sequences instead of actually doing character development. This can be a difficult balance for Star Wars because, of course, it needs to have the cool action, and I would never want to lose that, but at some point there has to be a break in that action so that the story can move forward and especially so that the characters can be developed. I also think that beyond just seeing more character depth, there were some deeper issues that the show could have explored that it just didn't. The biggest example of this was in the episode where they rescued the Separatist leader from the Empire. He was clearly someone who was loved and respected by his people and was trying to do right by them. It was the perfect opportunity for the Bad Batch to talk to a genuine Separatist and grapple with the real issues of the war and the ultimate futility of it. But they don't actually do any of that. They just rescue him and go on their way. And there never really is any time spent on the Bad Batch reflecting on the Clone Wars and their role in it, which is weird because the show is supposed to be about them figuring out their role in the galaxy now that the war is over, but I think that means they are going to have to look into their past and look at it as more than just following orders, even though that's what they were doing at the time. I was really disappointed that the show didn't dive into that. The last thing I want to critique about this show before I talk more about stuff I like is the world building. I thought that some of the changes the Empire was making were happening faster than made sense. I get that the Empire wanted more soldiers for a lower cost, but after how effective the clone army proved itself to be in the war, I would think the military leaders like Tarkin, who we know have a fair amount of competence, would favor a slower transition since they were changing a proven formula. I'm still not a big fan of the inhibitor chips. I think I've talked about that before on this channel, but I think taking away all agency from the clones sort of diminishes them as characters once the chip activates, and this season didn't really change my mind on that. I did find Wrecker's description of being under its influences to be interesting, and I actually think that aspect of it could eventually fix the inhibitor chips in my mind, but for now, I still just think that they're oversimplified and uninteresting. I was also not a fan of retconning the Kanan comics, but that's something I've talked about in another video, and if you want to hear my thoughts on that, I would highly recommend you check that out. Okay, that was a fair amount of negativity, but now I want to talk about some of the episodes I really liked, because I did overall enjoy this show despite its shortcomings. I'd have to say my favorite episode was the 8th episode, Reunion. We get to see the planet Bracca from Jedi Fallen Order, and I just loved how it was exactly like it was in that game. I just thought that was a really cool detail. And we get to see the return of Cad Bane, which was awesome. I literally almost fell out of my chair when Bane showed up, and I'm not even that reactive of a viewer, so for me to have that kind of a reaction showed me I was super surprised and really excited when he popped up. I also really loved the episodes on Ryloth. I know some people were mad about seeing young Hera because something too many cameos, but personally, I think it's a good thing when Star Wars puts Star Wars characters in Star Wars. In all seriousness, I really liked seeing how the Empire tried to manipulate Ryloth, and how some of the other clones finally questioned the Empire, even though it was brief. I also liked the 14th and 15th episodes of the show. I thought the finale was a bit slow, but the 2 episodes before it were really fun and exciting, and I thought the action was used really well there. I also really enjoyed seeing the Bad Batch interact with Crosshair, and I liked seeing how he did still care about his brothers, even though he felt that his place in the galaxy was with the Empire. And even though I thought the finale was slow, I did think seeing the destruction of Kamino was very moving, and I enjoyed that aspect of the episode a lot. I also loved that at the end we get to see Mount Tantus, which for those of you who don't know, is from the classic Thrawn trilogy of novels and is a secret cloning base. I'm guessing this will in some way tie into the Mandalorian era set of shows where the Empire wants to find Grogu for cloning, and I'm very excited to see how this will tie into those shows. Overall, I have to say that I did like Season 1 of The Bad Batch, even though I thought it left a lot to be desired. I'm hopeful that Season 2 will improve on some of the weaknesses of Season 1, and I am really excited to see how this show will end up tying into the other Star Wars shows, and I'm excited to see where the story of Bad Batch Season 2 will go. I overall still have a lot of hope for this show. Well, that's all I have for you guys this time. Please be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought about the Bad Batch. I'm actually really curious as to what the consensus is here. Did you guys like it, not like it, and be sure to say why as well. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter, and until next time, thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.